is only a whisper away.
They know his motive.
His murders of his son.
Beyond your wildest nightmares.
August 18th, 1973. Reports of a bizarre chainsaw-wielding family began to filter out of central Texas. Then silence. For 20 long years, nothing further was heard. 1995. Prom night isn't turning out the way you expected. You find yourself on the wrong road at the wrong time. About to come face to face with a living nightmare.
Welcome to my world.
The silence is over.
He's dead now.
Madness has returned.
Family values have gone straight to hell.
I want these people to know the meaning of horror.
You want scared? Have a look behind you.
A long night, boys. I could use a little action.
Hi, this is Russell Todd from Chopping Mall, He Knows You're Alone, and Friday the 13th Part 2, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
And indeed you are. Welcome back to The Hysteria Continues, and this time we are headed back to Texas for yet another Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And this one has been variably known as the New Generation, or the return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as you might
The next generation. And I can't believe Nathan is not the one to tell you this, Justin.
Do you know what? I'm getting myself mixed up with that Suede song, aren't I, Erik?
Yes,
New
that
Generation.
excellent Suede song. Yeah.
Yes. So, which of course that would be great if Nathan played out with that, but he probably won't. But, so anyway, the variously monikered Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie from 1995. So this is a Nathan pick, isn't it? And I know, Nathan, you've been champing at the bit to cover this movie.
Oh, it's been years in the making.
Is it? Unlike this movie. But obviously we're not going to spoil what we think about this. But how are you doing, Nathan, anyway?
Doing okay, except I'm not feeling well today, so it's one of those days.
I'm sorry to hear that. So, well, hopefully this will perk you up.
I'm hoping so.
This is probably the reason he's feeling unwell.
No, this is what's the cure for the unwellness.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll ask you at the end of this episode if we remember how you're doing, Nathan, and see if the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, has remarkable, miraculous healing powers or not.
That'd be awesome.
I have a feeling it won't, but who knows? We'll see. But Erik, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay, considering I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation.
Well, this could be a divisive show, couldn't it, perhaps? And Joseph, how about you?
I brought my own mic.
Did you? Did you buy a new mic?
No, I just brought one.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's a Simpsons reference, by the way.
Well, those always go over my head. But yeah, well, in time-honoured tradition, let's have a little chat about what we've been watching recently. So, Erik, have you caught anything since we last recorded?
Yes, the only thing I caught, and I know Joseph has watched this as well, is I have to think of what the title is. Five Nights at Freddy's? Is that what it's called?
That's correct.
Okay, so yeah, as you can tell, I was completely oblivious to this video game franchise. I'd never heard of it before. But it's the new Blumhouse movie that came out a couple of weeks ago. And it's about a rundown diner / video arcade from the 80s that has these animatronic animals that used to play live for the customers. And they have somehow got possessed by the souls of some dead children, murdered children, and they're going on kind of a murderous rampage, which all sounds quite good, but unfortunately I thought the film was incredibly flat. I can't really pinpoint what exactly wrong with the film. I mean, well, for starters, it's very tame. Now, not that that's an issue, because there's plenty of PG-13 horror that I really enjoy. But this one feels so watered down to it just comes across as being really bland. The lead character is this kind of insomniac who has to sort of take sleeping pills all the time, and he spends he spends most of the movie in kind of this sort of drugged out state if he's not asleep, which makes him kind of an unengaging lead. The horror is really minimal, I thought. I mean, it has kind of a mystery element to it, as our lead character had his brother was abducted when he was a child, and he's trying to solve that mystery. But that kind of, as that unfolds, it's a bit of a damp squib at the end, and I just found the film really sort of empty and hollow, and really, I suppose, boring is the best word for it. It felt like a film that had a load of production problems, because it didn't flow properly at all for me, and it felt like there was sort of huge plot holes, and it felt like there was tons of rewriting on the fly. So yeah, not a glowing recommendation for me. It's doing mega business at the box office, though, like obscene business, and I think it's on the back of its reputation as a franchise. And I see people giving it good reviews, and it seems to be playing well with kids. Because I was chatting to Meep about it, our friend Michael Ferrari, and his 2 kids really enjoyed it, and there's somebody at work took his 3 kids to see it, and they all loved it. So maybe I'm just the wrong generation, I'm almost at half a century now, so maybe it just wasn't for me. Because I was unfamiliar with the video game, maybe that affected my enjoyment as well, but yeah, I didn't enjoy Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm afraid. What did you think of it, Joseph?
Visually, I thought the movie was pretty interesting, at least in relation to the animatronic villains. It's my understanding that all those scenes with the mascots were done practically, and I think they only relied upon CGI just for color correction. I haven't really followed the movie's progress all that much, so I may be incorrect on that. But yeah, the movie looks amazing, but my compliments pretty much echo yours, or they end there, rather. I found the rest of it to be, joyless and depressing. I wasn't sure for, who my sympathies should lie. The human characters are so dour and perpetually depressed, and the animatronic bad guys' motivations are so muddled that any sense of tension or fear is lost. I've only seen bits and pieces of the video game source material, but what I've seen of it, at least had a sense of a cheap fun to it. Lots of jump scares and suspense, and there's none of that here. The movie's also, neutered, like you said, from its source material, to the point that anything that should jolt the audience is kind of held back to obtain that, general audience rating. I mean, like you said, it's made an obscene amount of money at the box office, even while it was concurrently streaming on Peacock. So it's obviously doing something right, but, ultimately, I wanted something more along the lines of a popcorn slasher film with animatronic robots slaughtering people left, right, and center, and we really don't get that. It's just boring and one note and way too morose for its own good.
But I will say it was a lot better than the animatronic Santa movie from last Christmas, but I can't remember the title of it. The one with the really sweary
Christmas,
lead.
Bloody Christmas?
That must be it, yes.
I actually enjoyed that one a little more, despite the foul language. At least it kind of was more horror-based. This one just felt too kiddie-friendly for my liking. So
there we go. That's all I've seen, Justin.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. Have you seen, incidentally, the 2 films that kind of reminds me of, I know the Nicolas Cage, is it Willy's Wonderland? Which which sounds like Eric's Friday night entertainment.
Rude.
But and also that Banana Splits movie from a few years ago.
Yeah, the Banana Splits movie is a million times better in my opinion.
Right. Okay.
I haven't seen Willy's Wonderland, Justin.
It surprises me, but there you go.
You've been to a wonderland of Willy's, I assume.
I expect so. Yes. Nathan, how about you?
No comment.
I have not seen Five Nights at Freddy's yet, but I have played the games, so I do want to see it. I just haven't had a chance yet.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you, Eric. Is there anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay. Well, what about you, Nathan?
Well, I watched one on your recommendation, The 13th Alley.
Oh.
Which is the bowling slasher.
Was it up your alley?
It was really good. Yeah, I feel like it came out around the same time as Gutter Balls, and I know you guys aren't big fans of Gutter Balls. I liked it, but I do feel that in Gutter Balls, some of the characters could come across a little obnoxious. So Well, in this one, it's a much more tamed down version. I mean, it does have like an obnoxious character, but it's played kind of for laughs. Really, it's a pretty harmless movie. I like that about it. I love the idea of a decapitated head coming out of the bowling ball return. That was fun, and of course, using a head for a bowling ball. I mean, it's not the first time, because they did it also in Sorority Babes and the Slime Ball Bolorama. But it's always fun to see, and so I loved it for that as well. Yeah, I would probably say I liked it more than Gutter Balls. I definitely enjoyed it. But yeah, the ending definitely threw me. But I think overall, I actually kind of liked that they ended it the way they did. It's just so stupid, and I like stupid stuff.
No. Joseph, did you watch it?
No, not yet. I do still have that copy. I plan to watch it, but it's not our top priority right now.
Okay. And Erik, I take it you've not seen it?
I've not seen it, no, but I am intrigued because it's directed by Bob Hopkins.
I mean, I kind of it's the fact that it was directed. It came out the same year as Gutterballs is coincidental, and there must have been something, something in the water. It quite happens quite often, doesn't it? Films that have got very similar premises come out at the same year for whatever reason, usually from somewhere like The Asylum. But I mean, it's really, really stupid, but it's kind of it's done in a way that it's kind of a bizarre movie. Because it kind of plays it straight, but everything is so ridiculous, and you've got this killer walking around in this medieval costume with this massive metal mask and a battle hammer. Didn't seem very practical, and there was no reason given for why the killer was wearing that garb. They just happened to be. But I love the all this. It's just all the ridiculous stuff, like the girl with putting voodoos, using voodoo and stuff, and just kind of ridiculous touches all the way through.
It's like one of the characters will say some harmless comment. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something about inviting her there. And it's like her first response is, "I know voodoo."
Yeah, that's all kind of pretty stupid. I mean, say if you're interested in, I've overtaken that. I've reviewed it on Hysteria Live. So, yeah, is there anything else, Nathan?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about it, but Wes wanted to watch The Lost Boys, so I watched that with him for the first time. He'd never seen it. I still like The Lost Boys, although ever since Joseph brought up the fact that they say Michael's name like constantly, like it's all I could hear. Like I just kept hearing his name, and I'm like, God, I feel like every sentence his name is in there. But that's I'm not trying to be insulting to the movie, because, like I said, I do like it. The maggot scene's kind of gross, though.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nathan. Anything else?
I don't remember if I talked about it last time or not, but I watched The Conference.
Okay.
I liked it. I thought it was a fun little slasher movie. Again, I love the killer's getup, but it's completely impractical. I just don't know how you could easily kill people, dressed up some of the ways these killers are dressed. But it's good. It's got a few moments. One particular moment that I was just, laughing hysterically at is this woman like kicks in the door, and she's got this big like scythe that she's just swinging it and screaming her head off wildly. And just the whole scene and build up to that was really funny to me. So yeah, I liked it.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of I quite liked it. I thought it was. I think the Scandinavian humour may have been slightly lost sometimes, but it was a fun slasher. It was fun to kind of throw back. So, but Erik, that's not one you've seen. It's on Netflix.
No.
What about you, Joseph? Have you any interest in that one?
Hey, I'll see it eventually, but I haven't seen it.
Right. Well, thank you, Nathan. At risk of rhubarb ladying, I take it that is your final offering.
Yeah.
Apart from the main feature, which we have you to thank for. But Joseph, how about you?
Just Five Nights at Freddy's for me this week.
Okay, well, thank you. I've got a few just to kind of rattle through. One of the things I was because I've been sort of laid up with a bad foot the last couple of weeks. I was flicking through Tubi, and for some reason I started watching Amityville in Space. I think it's Amityville in Space. all of about 5 minutes of it, because I just got the curiosity got the better of me to see. I just saw there were like 1 million Amityville horror movies or on there, and I knew that most of them were like low budget ones. But and then I started watching 5 minutes of Amityville Karen, and they are kind of terrible. I mean, they're like beyond. They're more like home movies than anything. Have any of you seen any of these kind of? I mean,
no, I see them cropping up on streaming services, and there's a lot of them on Prime and that. Like there's Amityville Scarecrow as well, I think. But no, I haven't braved watching any of them because I can tell that they're sort of tuppence halfpenny productions.
Yeah, I love Tubi to death, but they're not very picky about what they put on their platform.
No, well, I started watching. I just thought out of interest because I think I watched a documentary. I watched an Amityville, one of their original Tubi originals about the Amityville haunting or the Amityville crime or whatever you want to call it, and then that kind of popped up as a suggestion afterwards. I thought I'd give it 5 minutes, but it was just so beyond poor that I just thought I can't really waste 80 minutes of my life on this. So, but anyway, just a couple of other ones that I've looked at. The kind of the new, I kind of guess it's the kind of the kind of the most talked about horror movie at the moment in certain circles is the Argentinian movie Where Evil Lurks. Have you heard of that, guys? Is that one that's kind of cropped up on your radar?
It must not be talked about too much because I've never heard of it.
I've never heard of it. No.
Well, it's kind of it's one that got it's one of those films that's been, people have said it's one of the scariest movies ever made, and it got rave reviews in some of the newspapers, and so I kind of watched it on Shudder because it's a Shudder exclusive, and it it's an okay. Sometimes when you go into film and it's so overhyped and people go scariest movie ever and blah blah blah, and invariably it's not going to be the scariest movie ever. So I kind of liked it. I mean, the basic premise is this kind of remote Argentinian community where there's like a possession starting, and this possession can be kind of like a bit like The Ring almost, kind of, or The Grudge, kind of passed on to other people. So it kind of starts spreading through the community, and there's people trying to escape it and get away. And it's got some really shocking moments in it, which were kind of really kind of quite envelope pushing in some ways. But it kind of, for me, it kind of descends into kind of quite that kind of, trope of sort of possessed children being a bit spooky thing towards the end. So I didn't think, maybe I'll rewatch it with like, now I know what to expect. But yeah, so that was that. A couple of other things can I mention sort of quickly. I caught up with Killer Book Club on Netflix from this year. I think it's released in the summer this year.
Now, how was that? Because I really do want to see that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's a Spanish slasher set where you've got like a book club of students at a university are kind of reading a book about a killer clown, and then that prank goes wrong, somebody dies, and then soon after they start getting stalked and killed off one by a killer clown. So if you've heard that plot before, it's not a huge surprise, because essentially the film is kind of modelled almost exclusively on 90s slashers from Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Urban Legend. So it goes beyond really a kind of sort of a tribute to, even beyond the pastiche, I kind of guess. It hasn't really got an original bone in its body. Having said that, it's quite fun. There's some splashy 80s style gore in it. They kind of nods to the 80s with cover versions of things like Pet Shop Boys, It's a Sin. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It's fun, but it's kind of one of those films definitely disengage your brain. And hey, we're talking about slasher movies, we're slasher movie podcasts, and not to do them down, but that whole repetition thing of it's a kind of cookie cutter movie, but in a way that kind of makes you hungry for cookies. So it hits a lot of the familiar strides of like those kind of 90s slashers. It
almost sounded like you said you were hungry for cooties. I was like,
no, I don't think so. But so yeah, it's worth a watch, but it's kind of real kind of comfort horror. Really hasn't got a mean bone in its body, but it's it is kind of a love letter to those 90s slasher movies. So if you love those, then you probably get some mileage out of it, and if you don't, you probably have some fun with it anyway. So another couple of quick ones I mentioned was the on the low budget side of things, but in a completely different angle to the Amityville movies, was When the Trash Man Knocks from director Chris Moore, who's done films like Children of Sin and Triggered. And this one is kind of like a love letter to John Carpenter's Halloween, the original one. But I thought it was, really well done considering its budget, which is pretty low, but beautifully shot. We've got some very evocative shots in there, very well acted, and also got some kind of the quirkiness and originality. Even though it's definitely a homage to Halloween, it's definitely got its own kind of style to it, unlike the Killer Book Club. So I think that's, by the time this comes out, that'll be streaming on Amazon Prime. So yeah, that's worth checking out. And again, both this and Killer Book Club I've reviewed on Hysteria Live, if you want to check those out. And the last one I mentioned is Dead Hunt from Don Dola, who co-directed this in 2007. And friends of the show, Robert Long, sent me a screener of the extended cut, which is going to be hopefully coming out to Blu-ray, I expect, at some point soon. And if you've not seen that, again, it's a classic slasher movie setup, and then there were none sort of type setup of a group of horror fans go to a kind of party, small convention in a warehouse. And find themselves locked in and are literally picked off one by one. So again, a very low budget movie, but the last movie by kind of low budget or tier Don Dola, and that was a lot of fun. So if you do get a chance to pick that up when it comes out and it's an extended cut, then that's definitely worth doing so. So I know, Joseph, you've seen Dead Hunt at least, haven't you?
Yeah, Nathan saw it as well. We saw it in Baltimore with Robert Long and David Mollet, BTK. That's the last time I saw it. I think I reviewed it for your site.
You did, and yes, that's right.
Yeah. It's a pretty decent low-budget movie, actually. It doesn't do anything new. Obviously, it's a slasher film, what slasher film really does these days. But for the budget, they did a really good job. I thought it was pretty atmospheric. The characters were likable. I like the idea of a bunch of forum members getting together because I've run a forum for like 25 years, so it kind of speaks to me in that level. I do look forward to seeing it again. I haven't seen it since 2010 or 2011, whenever we saw it with Robert. So yeah, check it out.
Cool, excellent. And just before we get to the main part of the show, I'm just going to shout out to a new listener called Paige, which is Stuart's nephew's girlfriend, who bought my book and is a horror fan and started listening to the podcast. So if you're still listening out there, Paige, just wanted to say hi and thank you for listening. But we are moving on to the main attraction, and I'll get this right. What do you prefer? Do you prefer it the return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, Nathan?
I actually love both titles, so yeah.
I think The Next Generation is the more kind of common title.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're going to be covering after. What do we have, Joseph?
We have an HBO intro for the movie, actually.
Cool. Okay. Well, after this, Nathan will bring us back in.
20 years ago, 5 teenagers made a wrong turn and ended up dead. Well, they got off easy. Leatherface is back. This time he brought the family.
Are you having fun yet?
Matthew McConaughey.
You gotta watch getting in the car with strangers these days.
Renee Zellweger.
If you're gonna kill me, then do it.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation.
When a helpful family invites 2 lost couples in for a good old down-home massacre, the prom night teens find themselves all dressed up with nowhere to escape. Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey star in this hilarious, bone-chilling sequel to the horror classic. And with Leatherface, if looks could kill, he wouldn't need a chainsaw, which is a good tagline, by the way. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, when it came out when I was a teenager and desperate for any horror movie that I could find, because I think it was during the horror movie drought before Scream came along. So when this one came out, I watched it. Originally didn't know how I felt about it because it was so different. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting after seeing, the other Texas Chainsaw movies. It completely goes off the rails. It goes way out there in left field, especially by the time, spoiler alert, we get to the end and the guy in the limousine shows up. It's so ridiculous the whole time. I love the character of Darla, who is, kind of the female member of the family in this one. And, Matthew McConaughey goes all out as his performance as Vilmer with his remote control leg, which I thought was a really fun, character trait to have for him. I love the old couple at the end, Mr. and Mrs. Spottish. First they weren't even going to pick up Jenny, and then they finally do. And then she's just like, there's a monster chasing her with a chainsaw. Step on it, Mr. Spottish. And the dialogue is just so over the top ridiculous at times, which, obviously is something that I, very much love. I find that, it's definitely, to me, leans more towards satirical comedy than, I wouldn't call it bone chilling by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there's even one scene where Leatherface stands up and Renee Zellweger tells him to sit down and shut up, and he does, which I thought was hysterically funny because it's just ludicrous. But yeah, overall, I'm a huge fan, but I mainly wanted to pick this because I know that there's a chance I'll be alone here. So I decided I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts. So I'm going to go in order of how I see you guys on Skype. So Erik.
Okay, well, this is a much trashier production than the previous ones. But it manages to hit all the same beats as Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as the resident person on the podcast who doesn't really like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, I think I'm the only person in the world who doesn't really rate the first film as a masterpiece. I think the first half is fairly good. The second half I don't like at all. But this one I thought, going into it, I remember watching it for the first time thinking this could be the one that sort of grabs me now because it's about teens on their prom night and it's going to be more of a slasher film, and I think I'm really going to get into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise now. And, I can tolerate maybe the opening half hour of this film, but after that, it's just not my cup of tea at all, Nathan, I'm afraid. I mean, I like the opening narration. It's delivered in this really sort of Kent Brockman Simpsons style, and I loved how they when they're getting their prom photos taken at the start, it's accompanied by that sort of familiar flash sound effect from the first film. I thought that was quite clever, and I really like the character of Heather, she's this really extreme Valley Girl stereotype. And she gets all the best dialogue in the film. Unfortunately, once she leaves the film, my brain leaves the film as well, because I just the rest of it does all the same things that the rest of the films in this franchise do. Is it ties somebody to a chair, it has her screaming, it has the family screaming and arguing with each other, and it just becomes shrill and annoying, and it becomes unwatchable to me. I do love the 80s and 90s cliche of the Renee Zellweger character, how she's supposed to be the ugly duckling, when really she's this sort of Playboy model with a pair of horn-rimmed glasses on. Just take off the glasses and suddenly she's a princess. Sean's hair. Sean is, I think it's Renee Zellweger's date. He had the exact same haircut as I did in 1992, so if you wanted to see what I looked like 30 odd years ago, then that's it. Although I thought he was a really bad actor in this, and the same with the other male victim, Barry. I think one of his lines is, "Please, mister, you're scaring me." So don't give up the day job. So yeah, the early scenes with the teenagers had me thinking this was going to be more of a Friday the 13th film, and unfortunately it doesn't pan out that way. For me, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series gets better when the crazy family are removed from the equation, which is why I really enjoyed the most recent one that came out on Netflix last year, or earlier this year, was it? I can't remember. But it had just Leatherface as a villain, and that's when I can really get on board with this series, because I just find crazy family horror movies don't do anything for me. It's just one of those things. We all have this subgenre of horror that just don't, float our boats, and that's the one for me. It just, I can handle a crazy family if they're slightly rooted in reality, but when they're all just shouting and screaming at each other and revving chainsaws and they have the victim screaming as well, it just becomes too much noise for me. I thought the character of Darla was quite interesting, but I'm not sure if her initial appearance in the film is meant to make her appear to be a possible ally to the good guys, because it's kind of obvious if you've watched any of these films that she's a looper. I did like the idea of the bionic leg that Matthew McConaughey's character has as well. But that's, they're the only sort of few refreshing moments in the film for me, because, as I said, I thought the final hour of the film was just insanely boring and noisy. And I began to almost wish I could be watching Feliday instead, or Club Dread. That's how bad things got in that second half of the film. Although in hindsight, I think this is a better film than Feliday and Club Dread. So, as I said, there's the best films in this franchise are to come for me personally, which is sacrilege, I know. But as I said, I prefer Leatherface on his own, doing his Jason Voorhees type slashing rather than the crazy family kidnapping somebody and tying them to a chair yet again, and having them screaming yet again, and having them all arguing yet again. So yeah, it's a big thumbs down for me, I'm afraid, Nathan. I hated the film. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I can't say I'm shocked. Okay. Joseph.
Well, I can say that the acting in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, is pretty top-notch for the most part. Mainly from Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. I think they're both kind of fun to watch when they're not screaming at the top of their lungs. But unfortunately, the constant screaming takes up a majority of the runtime. And by the end of the movie, I just felt like I was tied to a chair and screamed at for an hour and a half, and it just wasn't very pleasant. There is a weirdness to the film. This insistence on throwing in everything, including the kitchen sink, that is kind of oddly compelling in its own sort of way. We get a cross-dressing Leatherface who may or may not be struggling with his sexuality. There's conspiracy theory antics suggesting that the Sawyer clan is kind of sanctioned by a faction of the government. And of course, a group of teens who stumble into all this hokum. None of it should work and none of it does consistently, but in bits and pieces, I found myself strangely fascinated by some of it. But, at the end of the day, like Erik, I kind of want a group of teens being chased by a madman. And we don't really get that here except in very, very small doses. I'm not sure why, at least up until this point in the series, that the creative forces behind these films keep up with the notion that paying, more lip service to the family and not Leatherface equals greater entertainment. It doesn't, especially when all they do is yell and scream and curse and dial up the general noise level to 11. Leatherface himself, he continues to devolve into like a sub-footnote character with nothing to do. And, the actions that a title like Texas Chainsaw Massacre would imply, namely a chainsaw massacre, continue to slide down this steep slope into this kind of pool of nonsense. There is no Chainsaw Massacre here. None whatsoever. Again, some of it is interesting in and of itself, those little pieces here and there. But, none of it really adds up to much of anything in the grand scheme of things. So, sorry, Nathan, I like moments in this film. The teen characters, I thought they had sort of a goofy, blasé attitude going into the main story that kind of promised some good slasher fun to be had. And, again, Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, they give it their all when they're asked to go back and forth in this kind of battle of, wits and wills. But, at the end of the day, all I could really say to myself was, what the hell did I just watch? And do I even really care? Not really.
All right. Now, Justin.
Okay, Nathan. Well, I'm going to shock you by saying I actually quite liked this movie. So I know. It was interesting because I was watching it and thinking, what the fuck is going on here? What are they going for? And although usually it's a sign that a film is not engaging, I had a quick sort of look at sort of a couple of reviews, and when I kind of realised it was kind of playing as a kind of parody or a satire of those kind of sort of late 80s, early 90s films, then I started to have a bit more fun with it. I must admit, I did enjoy the first 30 minutes with the kids leaving the prom and everything like that. And it, like Erik, I felt, is this going to be like kids go to prom, kids get lost, kids get chased by Leatherface kind of slasher movie. And but then I kind of sort of realised when there's stuff like you've got that kid, the one with the funny hair that Erik was talking about, who's Renée Zellweger's date, running. Everyone runs down the road away from Matthew McConaughey's. Is it Vilma, the character, and nobody runs off the road. Which obviously, I know it's a kind of cliche in horror movies where people never, always run away from a car chasing down the road and never actually just run off into the bushes, which is what you should do. And I thought that, so it for me, it definitely had that kind of satire kind of feel to it. I think it was kind of hit or miss in the second half. I think when it went completely over the top, I think if it had someone lesser than Matthew McConaughey playing, as in an actor that didn't have that complete conviction and going completely over the top, it might not have worked. But I thought it had that kind of gonzo kind of craziness that the second movie kind of achieved with some of it. Renée Zellweger was a likable kind of heroine. The Lisa Marie Newmar as Heather was I'd say again, it was that she was so over the top, like I think Erik said, the kind of valley girl, even though she's from Texas, that persona, it felt like something else is going on with this movie. And by the time you get to the whole thing, the weird conspiracy thing, which makes no sense really, this idea that the Sawyer clan are somehow controlled by the Illuminati, and somebody is paying them to terrify people so much that they achieve transcendence. But it kind of added this kind of what the fuck kind of gonzo weirdness to the thing that some of the other things, there's it's kind of weird with a slasher movie. You want that comfort, you want that repetitiveness, you want to hit those familiar beats some of the time. But when for me, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original has that, is peerless when it comes to that kind of torture. It's almost like torture, not torture porn, but torturing its audience. And Marilyn Burns' character at the dinner table thing is one of the most intense and uncomfortable 20 minutes, ever put to celluloid. So nothing can really ever match up. So again, Kim Henkel seemed to be, he was parodying it with this. But there's so much gonzo weirdness and so much over the top acting and so much kind of elevated emotions and everything goes completely over the top. It's kind of quite difficult when you're watching. It's such an assault on the senses of what exactly they're trying to achieve with this. The whole other thing with Leatherface, I think it's kind of really interesting that whereas arguably, I know Erik, you say you love the later sequels, but they do become that cookie cutter Leatherface, where Leatherface is the kind of interchangeable boogeyman of Freddy, Michael, Jason, whatever, which again is not a problem. But in this, it's kind of interesting because I can't imagine them ever making Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees into kind of a drag queen. And so this idea, which I think is really interesting, that Leatherface takes on the personality of the faces he wears, is something that I think they were trying to get across with this. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And also, given what the the kind of audience reaction to something like A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, with the kind of, the mainstream audience or the horror reaction to a film that kind of played with homophobia and sort of gay kind of undertones, to actually have something like this in this movie, even though it's a very low budget movie, but it was still like the fourth in the franchise, was quite brave and quite interesting. That the end scene with the you were talking about the bus, and then Matthew McConaughey's character being taken out by a complete random person flying a airplane, crop dust or whatever, flies and sort of chops him up. It's so bizarre. And then Renée Zellweger being taken away by this man who's presumably kind of bankrolling the Sawyer clan. It's kind of stuff that you couldn't, it's almost like a movie that couldn't be made like this now and be released to the cinema. I couldn't imagine a movie like this being released. So it comes at a really interesting time in horror movie filmmaking, slasher movie filmmaking. Like 95 probably was the nadir of horror movies, really, arguably, because, after a slow decline through the late 80s and the kind of desert of the early 90s with a lot of horror movies. I mean, not exclusively, but then the whole thing being reinvented, arguably, with Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson's Scream. But I think this movie has a kind of interesting quirk. It's doing something similar, but in a different kind of way. It's satirizing those kind of later horror movies, kind of remaking Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but turning it into like another kind of gonzo horror comedy akin to what Tobe Hooper did with the second movie. So it's not a movie that works completely, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought it was, and also kind of admired it for doing something kind of very different. So there you go, Nathan.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I'll agree. It did do something different in that it completely avoided being entertaining in any way.
No, it was like beyond entertaining. It transcended entertainment. I love at the end when you were talking about, this Matthew McConaughey's character, Vilmer, just gets hit in the face by flying like an airplane. And like there's no rhyme or reason. I mean, like you said, it's just a random person flying this airplane. It's not a character in the film, trying to take him out or anything like that. This looks like some weird accident. I also love that when the guy picks her up at the end, like, in most movies, what you would imagine is, like he would, the ending would be, she's in the back of the limo with this guy and he's crazy too, and it would go off. But no, the guy literally is like, no need to worry. I'll take you to the hospital, which he does, which I thought was very odd after everything she just saw, like, and that she had witnessed. I guess he thought nobody'd believe her.
It's and also, of course, in that scene, there's a Marilyn Burns is there, isn't she?
Yep.
And a couple of other people.
Yeah. The grandpa from the original, Leatherface from the original. No, not Leatherface. Sorry. Franklin.
It was Franklin, was it? Okay, yeah. Because I know Gunnar Hansen was invited back to do this, and he turned it down, didn't he? But he turned down the previous one as well, didn't he? Well, only because they wouldn't pay him. They wanted to pay him scale for it. But what do we think about? Because from my understanding, this movie got a very limited release to about 20 odd cinemas in 1995, and I found some reviews from back then, which I mentioned. And then, of course, as has happened a number of times with people like Rachel Ward from when she hit big with the Thornbirds, and then they re-released Night School or The Final Terror with her and Daryl Hannah. This was a similar case, wasn't it, with Matthew McConaughey and Renée Zellweger. Were both just graduated, didn't they, from Texas University, I think, and 2 years later, or a year later even, they both hit the big time with Jerry Maguire and whatever it was that Matthew McConaughey hit on the big time, and it got re-released to cinemas after they were both famous, but again to quite a small release, which I think accounts for the reason why there's two different titles for the movie. But then I think it got a saturation video release to sort of try and play up their involvement. But from what I've read, they're not. They're kind of. They're not. Neither of them are sort of. Certainly, Renée Zellweger hasn't sort of distanced herself from the movie, has she? But yeah, so I know Renée Zellweger said she had no shame about being in this movie, which is kind of refreshing, isn't it?
I guess, they actually got lucky in that Renée Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey are two of the main characters in the movie, so they can kind of slap their names on the cover, and it's not really a lie or a misdirect. I remember the days of going to see the video store, and I would see Alice, Sweet Alice, and they would have Brooke Shields' name. Her role is important in the film, but she's hardly the main character.
Well, exactly. I mean, with this one, they are the leads, aren't they?
Yeah, I know that some people say if they put Shadows Run Black starring Kevin Costner, people might be disappointed if they went and watched it.
So do you have any other backgrounds?
Let's see. Well, we talked about some of the background that I had, but let's see what else I got here. They also asked Jim Sido, hope I'm not mispronouncing that, if he wanted to return, but he turned it down. I imagine, probably at that point in time, it was probably a matter of, I can't do all that physical stuff probably required for the role. And as we said, Sally or Marilyn Burns is on the gurney at the end, which has always been a weird scene to me because, I mean, it's, Sally from the original, but the way it's played, I mean, you would never have known unless, you literally looked it up. Because I remember the first time I watched it back in 95 when that scene happened, I kept thinking, who is that supposed to be? Because she looked at her like she knew her. But you know what it was? This is artistic, you guys. She knew her because they experienced the similar horrors.
When I read that she was had a cameo at the end, I was like, ooh, is this all meant to take place in 1974 as well? But then I realized there's a title card at the start of the film that says, no, it's definitely May or something of 1994. So,
well, that has to be the worst hospital ever if she's still there after 20 odd years.
Yeah. What, talk about waiting times. Yeah.
Bill Johnson, who played Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw 2, was offered the role of Leatherface, but it didn't really pan out. So, when they went with Robert Jacks, who, according to Renee Zellweger, was actually super excited about taking the role of Leatherface, which I can understand because, it's an iconic character. So definitely worth it. Well, let's see. I think that's all that I got because, everything else I'm seeing we've already talked about.
Well, thank you, Nathan. What about you, Erik?
I have got nothing else to add apart from we did a Fango flashback earlier this year, or maybe it was last year, where it did a really unusual thing for Fango, where they had an article on the making of this film, which it was at then was called The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but they also had a 2-page review of the film, which they never used to do. But the review is scathing. It ends with the words, it's how bad the film is and how unwatchable it truly is, they say. So they weren't fans, even though that they were plugging the making of in the same issue. So I would be on board with that review, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, thank you. What about you, Joseph? Do you have anything else to add? No. Okay. Well, I've just got a couple of little bits here from the reviews that I found from its original release in 95. So a couple of paragraphs. So Columbian said, the new movie gets back to the weird, campy attitude of the original. An independently financed film made on a shoestring budget. And they said the film had wild energy. The Atlanta Journal said it was a nice mix of horror and satire. It's a real cut-up. And in an interview from the same issue of the Columbian, Kim Henkel said the film was a black comedy about dysfunction. And he said he purposely decided not to have too much gore in the movie, which I think you alluded to, Erik, didn't you, when you said no one's killed with a chainsaw in this movie.
Yeah, Joseph, I think, said that, yeah.
Yeah, there's very little gore at all in this. So I think it's probably the least bloody. Although, of course, the original didn't really have much in the way of gore, did it?
There's barely any in 3 either.
Yeah, but the only time you really see, I mean, the most blood you see is when Leatherface cuts his leg at the end of the movie when he drops a chainsaw on it, if I remember correctly. But, okay, well, Nathan, are you surprised at our reactions?
Yes and no. I expected Erik's reaction because, I've known how he's felt about the series. We've covered 3 already, so I wasn't expecting him to enjoy it. Joseph, I'm not too surprised because I feel like he's seen it before and I kind of knew he wasn't a fan. Your reaction, Justin, pleasantly surprised. I kind of thought you'd be a little bit more scathing to it.
Okay, well, they'd like to keep you on your toes. Well, let's see. What was the consensus on the Facebook group, Joseph?
Well, we got 44 comments for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. That's pretty impressive. Jared Gravoya says, I love everything about this film. The characters, the misdirection, the 90s rock music, the over-the-top performances, the double VHS cover art. It is one of the best slasher sequels ever. Eric, you would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, here's one that Eric would agree with. Miles Hamer writes, a bellowing, ugly cacophony of a movie that's ugly and misjudged on every conceivable level. Not even a single chainsaw death in this miserable, wretched mess that has the temerity to end on some barely thought out conspiracy bullshit. I hate every atom of this fucking thing. Wow.
Wow. Couldn't be more polarized, really. That's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on all that we're doing. Listen on Amazon, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and about 1 billion other podcatchers, both good and terrible. Join us on Patreon for as little as $1 per month to help support the show, or if you're financially inclined to do so, select one of those tiers that fits your budget for that extra monthly bonus content. That's patreon.com/The Hysteria continues, all one word. And that goes for our email address as well. thehysteriacontinues@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And thank you for everyone who has signed up to Patreon. And we hope you enjoyed the Halloween 2 commentary we've just released. Presumably that would be out by now, wouldn't it? I take that as a yes. So...
yes. Yes, it has been released.
Okay, excellent. Well, I know we have a little bit of feedback to come up, but let's see if Erik's Joke of the Week gives us a little buzz or not.
It's my Joke of the Week. It's so fantastic.
What do you call it when the chainsaw-wielding villain runs after the ditzy character in Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation? You call it the Leatherface Heather chase. Because her name's Heather. And Heather chase and Leatherface can rhyme. And so that's the joke.
I thought the joke was actually mildly amusing, but I think Eric's sweet tears are even funnier.
Yeah, that was funny.
So cruel.
Yeah.
Well done, Erik. Yes, thank you.
There's your fucking daily bread. Eat it like you did those horse cunts before you became a priest.
So, we have some feedback, don't we? Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
All right. This says, have any of you fine persons seen The Conference? It's a genuinely good Swedish slasher film that owes a bit to Severance and a surprising amount to the Friday the 13th franchise. A mass killer is picking off office worker types at a sort of cabin site. I liked it more than time travel slasher Totally Killer, which is also pretty good. I enjoyed Dark Harvest too, but that one is a bit more hit and miss. I'm looking forward to Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. As for Trick or Treat, not really a slasher, decent cast, not bad looking, somewhat dull. I actually quite like it. I think this is because I first watched it when I was very, very drunk and had achieved a zen state of inebriation. The director, Gary Graver, had a surprisingly respectable career as a cinematographer. He worked with Orson Welles and John Cassavetes. As a director, you may remember him for such films as Bikini Traffic School. And that was from Daniel. I've not seen Bikini Traffic School, but I would watch it.
We have seen Moon Over Scorpio, or whatever it was called.
Moon in Scorpio.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever. We did a commentary for it.
We did a commentary for it, didn't we?
And we actually talked about The Conference in our recently seen.
I've mixed feelings about the Thanksgiving. Partly, well, purely really to do with Eli Roth, really, because I don't hate his movies. Some of them I'm not a great fan of, but some of them I haven't minded. But he tends to go for that kind of slightly more cynical, kind of extreme feel to it. So how that kind of transfers to like an 80s style slasher movie, like a tribute to early 80s slasher movies, I don't know.
But this is not. It's not based on the trailer in Grindhouse. It's inspired by it, but not. It's not a remake of it in the same way that Machete, was made from the trailer.
And I have a feeling more's the pity, because I wanted a movie based. I mean, that duplicated that trailer, and I don't think that's what we're going to get. But I've been waiting for this movie for so long that I'm trying to taper my expectations, but at the same time, I'm really excited for it. So it's just a wait and see thing.
I kind of, for me, I'd like to be proved wrong, and I to be honest, I quite enjoy the Terrifier movies for what they are. But I kind of feel that that's kind of seems to be the kind of bellwether for horror movies at the moment with filmmakers. So it's kind of, for me, it feels like it may be like a mean-spirited kind of take on that kind of extreme horror that you see in something like Terrifier. I'd like to be proved wrong, or at least if it's done well, then that would be something. But I kind of part of me was hoping that it would be slightly kind of cheesy, fun, early 80s slasher sort of pastiche. But given it's Eli Roth, I kind of think he's playing to his own audience. So let's wait and see. I kind of guess. Well, thank you for writing in, and we have another one, I think, Erik.
Yes, this is from Alyssa Kaloya, and she says, hello again. Thank you for reading out my feedback on your Psycho 3 episode. I just wanted to include a couple of tidbits about the Psycho series after the third movie. First, Psycho 4 was a made-for-TV movie airing on Showtime in November 1990 before its VHS release. While I like the scenes with Norman's past with Henry Thomas and Olivia Hussey, the wraparound segments just don't work for me. I should note that Psycho 4 ignores Psycho 2 and 3, so Mick Garris was rebooting sequels 8 years before Halloween H2O. Second, there was another made-for-TV movie, Bates Motel, that aired in 1987. Obviously, it's not related to the A&E TV series, as it has Bud Cort inheriting the motel from a deceased Norman Bates. I haven't watched it yet, but Universal did release it on DVD a few years ago, so I may have just ordered it. Anyway, thanks again for another great episode, and that's from Alyssa Kaloya. I do remember that Bates Motel from 1987, and I'm pretty sure I have watched it, but I can't remember anything about it.
It was originally intended to be a pilot for a TV series, I think.
I think that's true as well, yeah. But yeah, I haven't seen Psycho 4 in a while. I do remember thinking it was okay, though. So
yeah, because I'm kind of... the Bates Motel with Bud Cort, I was interested, because I mean, Harold and Maude is kind of one of my favourite movies of all time, so I'd be interested to see...
Oh, really? Mine too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that movie, but I think we should pick that up for an off-piste at some point, shouldn't we? It's almost a horror movie, but a very sort of black comedy. And Psycho 4, I kind of don't remember the wraparound, but I do remember Henry Thomas and Olivia Hussey in the movie. So yeah, but it'd be interesting for us to pick it, which I'm sure won't be too far off in the future, I guess. But interesting insights, Alyssa. So thank you again for writing in.
And that's it.
That's it. So is anything else that we need to discuss? I was going to mention, if you haven't picked up our Vinegar Syndrome have just put out Rabid Grannies, which of course is another one of Nathan's favourites, on a very snazzy Blu-ray edition with a fantastic lenticular cover. And we did a commentary for that, which was a lot of fun. So, if you do get a chance to pick that up. We've got a couple of more commentaries in the wings, haven't we?
Yeah, one's for a movie we've already done a commentary for. I'm not going to say what it is, but it's a second commentary, and it's worth it.
Yes, yeah. So that, and also there's another one for a newer movie, which I don't think has been announced yet. But yeah, so keep your eyes out for that. But I guess it's my choice next time, isn't it? So, well, I did, on Hysteria Lives, I did manage 31 reviews for Halloween, amazingly. That's what comes from lying on a sofa with a damaged foot. So I kind of got a bit more into my 90s groove when it comes to slashers. So I thought it was one that was reviewed on Hysteria Lives many years ago, and I haven't seen it since way, way back in the day, and I used to have the VHS of it. So I thought maybe going not exactly sight unseen. It's A Clown at Midnight from 1998 or 97. I think it's 98. A Canadian
99.
99, sorry, is it? Okay. I think it's a Canadian production. So I can remember quite liking it, but it remains to be seen. But I think it'd be quite interesting also for maybe for us to have a chat about some other of those kind of post-Scream slashers outside of the big boys of, I know we did last summer in Urban Legends and Valentine, some of the others that, slip between the cracks, as it were. So, so that's my choice for next time. And Nathan, what are we playing out with?
We are playing out with We Are Family by Sister Sledge.
Okay.
A nice little up-tempo disco number to finish the Texas Chainsaw Massacre TNG.
So fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. And we will catch you next time for some more clown action. So say goodbye to the good people.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.